So today we're talking about advanced array methods. We'll get started with callbacks, kind of remind you what callbacks are because they're very important to this lecture today and to this lesson. So advanced array methods are the most important when it comes to in the future, especially when it comes to like React and advanced JavaScript. Uh, the reason why they're really important is because they help you do work that you don't have to do with like for loop and things like that. So they're already built functions, and they're also high order functions. And I'll ask you what that means. What does high order function means in a minute? But they are high order functions. They are already built in JavaScript. So if you go to let's just kind of introduce first before we go into example. So in this module, we'll give you a practice of advanced array methods such as map, dot filter, and dot reduce. Introduce you to idea of callback. I already introduced you to that, so we'll get more familiar with it. Both advanced array methods and callbacks will make it easier for you to interact with the larger data sets, like we started on last sprint. As you progress in your journey on web developer, these will likely become some of your favorite tools, both displaying data and dealing with user data. So these arrays, dot map, dot filter, and dot reduce, they will become like your tools, part of your tools, and they will just keep coming back throughout everywhere in JavaScript. So even when we reach React and Node, they will just keep coming back. And every day you deal with, okay, let's do dot map. I'll keep saying do dot map. So you'll get used to it. At the end of this lecture, on this module, you should be able to demonstrate the proper use of callback functions and passing functions to another functions as the parameters. You should be able to use dot map, dot reduce, dot filter, at least those three, and describe their uses. So these methods are part of the already existing methods of array. So now if we go to here and we go to console log and we create let's see, let's do array. Actually, let's do this. So let's do var. Let's do something like my array is equal to, let's create a basic array and say something like add some data. Let's say something like sky, earth. It doesn't matter what we add here. The main thing is just we want to see the array method. So now we save it that. So it's in the system now. So if we say my array, which shows the sky and the earth, but if we say my array again and we say dot, so here's where you will see those methods I'm talking about. And these methods are also part of the ones I showed you last time, like splice or slice or sort or those. So right here is all the methods of array. So these are all the methods of an array, other than these ones. So all these you could use them, but the ones that we use the most are like sort, to string. You will see a lot to string. This means if you want to take an array that is numbers and you want to change them to like a string, that's how you get it. This is reverse. It will reverse the whole array. So now if we use that, it will take the earth and make it like a sky and reverse it that way. As you can see here, this is the one today we're going to cover, that reduce. This is another one we're going to cover today, that map. And also another one we'll cover. Also, we did talk about a little bit of, no, we didn't talk about, but I mentioned it in the chat, that index of. We'll cover that. I think we'll cover about that for each, but that filter definitely will cover that. So all these are methods, are things that you could use for the array to do something with the array, just like the dot length, which will basically return the length of the array. The other ones, let's actually try the other ones too. That reverse. Let's use that reverse maybe, and see what that does. Let's say reverse. So now this is gonna return so it returns something else, but it should reverse. I think you have to use something else. You have to tell it what it needs to reverse, but it's part of all these methods basically. So that's one thing to understand. These are not like, we're not making these up. They're part of already existing powerful methods of array. All right, so let's go to our notes, the note taking place right here. So let me set up my environment. Okay, let's just get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to ask you guys, the first thing I want to do is high order functions. Who can give me a just a couple of words about what is high order function? Who remembers the last time we talked about high order function? It was the last lecture, and it was to the end.
Is it like two functions inside each other? And
Yes.
so the tab one has can access the one inside, but it's not go upward.
Okay, so that one is, it's closed there. It's very similar, but that one, I'll say that one is a sort of like closure. So
Oh,
this one
but
is higher order
The
function.
um, the function that takes another function
Yes, function that takes another function as a what?
as a parameter or argument.
As a parameter, yes. So function that takes another function as a parameter. And remember, parameters are right after the function. You have two bracket. You have two parentheses. In that parenthesis, you could put other things, like if you want to say something num1, num2, then you have to, at the bottom, when you're invoking the function, you have to say num1 is 2, num2 is like 5, and then you could add those two numbers. Just like that, you could also add a function in there, just like those items. So high order function is functions that take other functions as parameters. Okay, that's good. You guys remember the last lesson. Okay. What about callbacks? Do you guys remember anything about callbacks? Callback functions. So these are actual functions too. What do they do? What do you guys think? We touched a little bit last time.
So the
Okay.
callback functions are a function that pass into high order functions into an argument.
Okay. So that's a good description. So they are functions that we pass to high order function as a argument. And when I say argument, it's the opposite of parameter. So just like when we say example, when we say function, say hi, something like that, and we put here a parameter. We say something like num1 and num2. Let's actually say add here, so it makes sense. Add. So this is actual function, and we return num1 plus num2. Okay. So now this is a function. It returns. It adds those two numbers, and when we call it, when we say that, we have to give it an argument here. These are parameters, and this is the argument. So always the parameter could be whatever you want. You can name it whatever you want, but you have to match it with a parameter, with the argument. So we have to say 3 and 4, something like that. So now it just takes 3 and plugs it in here, and takes 4, plugs it in here, and then just passes that like that. So that's what we mean when we say parameters and arguments. So let me just scribble through, like, just show you what. So this is this is parameter. So parameter. Excuse, I'm just using my mouse. I don't have a drawing thing. And these are argument. And they're connected. So that's when we talk about, when we say arguments and parameters. So now what we're trying to say here is higher order function is this one. And if you put, instead of like num1, num2, you put a function right there. So let me just delete that. Let me delete all this. So let me just let's just go to an example and show you exactly what I mean. So let's just comment out this function. And keep that in mind. Keep this simplicity in mind so that you don't lose the perspective of what parameters is and what arguments are. So now we're going to create a simple calculator. And I think it's the simplest way to show a high order function and callback. So we're going to create a function. We're going to call it calc. So it's going to calculate the numbers. So this is a high order function. So it's gonna be a calculator basically. So we're gonna say num1, num2, and then we're gonna say CP. Remember, what is a CP? Can somebody tell me what CP is?
Callback.
Callback, yes. So CP stands for callback, but you could call it whatever you want. Just like we could call it anything we want here. Like we could call it like number one, or we could call it the first one, or whatever. But it just give it something that makes sense. So now we have two numbers that we will calculate as a calculator, and then we have a function that will work with these. So now let's just open the function and return the function, which is CP, and then also two parameters. So the two parameters are num1 and num2. So this is a high order function. So let's just assign it to higher order function. Okay. So it's basically taking a function. We didn't create this function yet. So that's what we're going to do in a second. So let's create a function that plugs in here. And then we're going to give it the two numbers. So the function that we're going to plug in there is, let's call it, so we're going to switch things around. So I want to like make you used to an arrow function, because it's going to come up and we're going to use a lot of arrow functions. So we're going to say this function is, the name is add, and we're going to give it two parameters. So we're doing an arrow function now. It's basically, I'll convert it to a normal function so you can see the difference. So we're going to say num1, num2. This is our callback function. And then we're going to say, I hope you guys have the notes about the arrow function, how to convert a normal function to an arrow function. So num1 plus num2. Remember, an arrow function, we don't have to do the return. We don't have to do the parentheses. This is a function. That's it. This is a function. So now, let's actually just refresh our memory, and let's convert this to an actual function. Like, not actual, but this is actual function. I mean, like function like this. Let's convert it. So all we need to do now is start with a function, and then move the add to right here next to it, and give the parameters num1, num2, and then just open it and say return. It's exactly like this one, but it's different. I mean, this one, the one we created at the top, and return, and we're going to return num1 plus num2. So this is exactly the same as this. You could take a screenshot if you want. You could take a note if you want, but remember that we always, this is how we write an arrow function, is by just first you define a variable, which is supposed to be the function name. So this goes to this, and then we're gonna take the function, we're gonna remove the function, so there's no function here. We're gonna put an equal sign, and then give these parameters right here. They go right here. And then we're going to put, after the parameters right here, we're going to put this arrow function. And then we're going to remove the parameters and the return and move these two to right here. Everybody good with that? Hopefully. So how to convert an arrow function to normal function, and then vice versa. Okay, so that was not the point. So the point is, now this is a callback function. So this is a callback function. Another thing you don't do is you don't invoke the callback function. You don't say add and then just put something here. So you don't invoke it. It's already invoked right here. So it's invoked right here. So we're invoking only this one. That's what we're invoking. So now let's invoke that function, the high order function. Let's say console log, and then say something like calc. Give it a num1 and num2, which is, let's say, 3 and 4, and then also the callback function, which is right here. We already created it. We're going to call it add. So now if we run, what's going to happen is these two numbers are going to be blocked in here. And then this function is going to say, okay, I have those two numbers. We're good. But I don't know how to calculate it. So there's nothing that adds here, those two numbers. So I'm going to check this function. I'm going to check if this function actually exists, and I'm going to execute it. So it's going to check this function exists. Okay. Yes, I have a third argument, which is a function, which is right here. And I'm going to execute it right here. So it's going to execute. And then this function is going to run, which is the callback function. And it's going to add those two numbers, right? Now that's what we're going to get. So if we run that, we should have a simple 7. So it just adds. So now if we could create more callback functions now. So let's create more callback functions. Now we're going to create the minus, the plus, the minus, subtract, and add. So we already have to add. So subtract, sub and line high, and then we're going to say this one mult, and then we're going to say this one divide for divide. So div. So now we're just going to change this sign to minus, multiply, and then divide. So now if we run any of these functions, so now we have this. So let's subtract. So we're just going to change the add to sub. So it's going to subtract 3 from 4. So now it should, the subtraction callback should run, and it should be -1. If we multiply it, we just take this, replace it with this, and then we should have 3 times 4, which is 12. So, and divide the same too. So this would be something like fraction, hopefully. So, so yeah, so that's a callback function and higher order function. Any questions about that? Any questions before we move on? Because this is the basis. This is the core to what are we gonna learn today, which is advanced arrays. All they do is have a callback function. That's all they work with. So if you don't get this part, the advanced arrays we're gonna learn today will be very difficult to understand, or maybe it will be somewhat difficult. And you could read this.
Where is the higher order function now? I get the part where it's saying function, callback function. Where is the higher order function comes in?
So higher order function is the function that runs when we do here. So when we start, it's the function that puts everything together. So it takes the parameters we gave, the numbers, and it takes the function and it mixes it together. It's like a mixing machine, basically. Okay. And then it returns. So every time we return a function, which is right here, that means execute this function, right? Run it. So does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see any other way I can explain it. I think in general, I mean, this is the simplest way to explain it. It's just, this is a higher order function. These are callback functions. You take these and you replace them with here. So that's pretty much it. So so every time, so let me draw on it. Every time we execute the add and we put add here, this function takes these two numbers, the calc, which is this one. It takes these two numbers and it puts it right here, 1 and 2. And then it says, okay, there's this function called divide. Let's call it add even. So there's a function called here add. Let me find that function. It just goes to the program and it finds that function right here. So it takes that function and it puts it right here. And then it says, okay, what am I supposed to do with this information? I have 3 things. I have 2 numbers and I have a function. What am I supposed to do with it? So it says then, so what we did was we said return this function and then give these 2 numbers as a parameter for this function, for the callback function. So we give callback function. So the callback function runs and then this callback function goes back to here, and it gets executed. So now it just runs its stuff, and it adds the two numbers, and then it returns, and that's what we get the answer for. Okay, clear all drone. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, all right. Let me know if you have any questions, if you need any more clarification about that one. So let's move on to the main thing for today. Let me move this to here. Yeah, we're gonna move into the main thing, which will cover all day, the rest of the assignment. Which is, I'm really excited about this part because I really like advanced arrays. They're kind of like my favorite thing in JavaScript, of advanced array methods. Okay, so let's actually get started with. I'm not sure if you guys watched the video I shared. A lot of times when we reach the time, make sure that you use the 30 minutes to kind of like familiarize yourself. Even if you don't understand it, it's fine. Just the video I shared was 20 minutes. So if you didn't even read the training material, make sure maybe if I share a video, sometimes I will share, sometimes I will not. It depends. And in the future, inshallah, we will make videos for these lessons. But make sure at least you read about it. You read a little bit what advanced arrays are, and then you watch the video. You could also go to YouTube and type the name, exact name, like this, and then watch maybe one video of like 10 minutes about it, so that when you come to lecture, you already know in general what it is, and then now I'll just give you the details, and then it will kind of settle in your brain. So it's really, really important to do that. That's the main reason why we give the 30 minutes. Otherwise, we will just jump into the lecture right away too. So the first thing we will do is the main thing advanced arrays do is, so here's the main thing they do. They take a large data, a data you gave thousands, millions of information, and then they reduce it, or they filter it, or they map. So the map basically stands for loop. It's basically you going over something. You basically go into a data and you check in one at a time. So a map is the for loop. Reduce is more like if you take the data and you take part of the data. Let's say you have a numbers in the data. Let's say population of a country. It takes all those populations and it reduces it to a number, one number. So it adds up. It adds all the data in that data set. Filter is what it says. It filters. It takes something out from the data. So it grabs something and it says, okay, I don't want this part. I want this part. So that's what it does. And there's other methods that we could use, but these are the main ones that we'll use. So this stands for loop, basically. And we did for loop a little bit. Remember the arrays. I asked you to check the data. It was arrays of objects, objects of array, and you check each one of them. You check the cars, you check the car make, all that stuff. Basically, that's what we're doing, but we're doing with a special method. So that's what these arrays, these methods do. Okay, so let's create a data set. So I have a data set here that we'll use. So I'm just gonna copy it and we'll paste it here. So it's a data set. So it's a city data. So city, Seattle, Washington, population, and land area, 83, all that stuff. So New York, Boston, and then Kansas City. Okay. So it's just the basic data that we're going to use today to kind of show you what we're trying to do. Okay. So let's start with the map. Okay. So the map function. So map. So I'll show you how to learn all this, and you can learn the other methods too. So a map, that's the function. That's the method. So the best way to learn is to go to Google and type something like JavaScript map function, and go to MDN and read about it. So what is it about? What does it do? And also go to other websites too. Here, so it says here, map object holds a key value pair and remembers the original insertion order of the key. Is this the right map we're trying to use? No, this is different map, I think. Okay,
You
we
gotta
want
put
map.
dot.
We want map method. Yeah, we want this one, I think. Yeah. So okay, so map is is an actual function. As you can see, it's already built in function. It creates a new array. So this is actually really important part of the map, and that's why a lot of people use it in like very advanced projects and applications. It returns a new array. One of the main aspects of a programming is that you do not change the original data. So this is called mutation. So do not mutate or change the original data. So I give you a list of things, an array. Do not change the original one, but always make a copy of it. So this map, instead of using our for loop, if you use a for loop for this, let's say we use a for loop and we said, okay, add something to this array. We already did a mutation, which is no in programming. We want to avoid any mutation, any change to the data. We want to copy it, make a copy, make a change to that copy, and then if we want to make a change to that copy, and then we make another copy. And it's also a huge thing in the. There's actually a whole framework, a framework. What do you call a system that was built? I think it's called Immutate or something like that. It's like React that was created to kind of like tackle that issue, but you want to keep it so that it does not the data that does not mutate or change. So it says the map method creates a new array populated with a result of calling a provided function on every element in the calling array. So this is just a basic for loop. So now this is how it works. Um, so we're gonna go over it actually in our here. But first thing is you need an array, and then you need to create a variable, and then call the array, and then call it dot map, and then after that you do something with it. Okay. So let's actually write some notes here. What so you guys remember what this is. So it returns a new array. Okay, and also does not manipulate the original array. You know, I'm keep repeating this because it's like literally the main reason why that map is used instead of just for loop. Used for converting data. So we'll see what that means too. And it needs a return keyword. So instead of that, we'll say it returns a new array. I already said that. Okay. So that's mainly what it does basically. So it takes a array, it returns a new array, and then it does not manipulate or change or mutate the original array. Okay. So let's see how it's written. Okay. So now what we need to do is first, let's just go over it first. So let's create a new, let's call it here something like our data, you know. So this is how you start. So first thing is first you save the result in a new array, a new variable. So now we call the data then. So we call this data, we call city data. So city data, and then we say dot map. So we open it because it's a function. Now we put, it's a function and we're gonna put another function in it. That's where the higher order function came. So that's why we'll keep learning higher order function, is because it happens in here and this is how you use it. So now we're gonna say function. So this function will take a parameter and we'll call that parameter an item. This item is just like the I in the for loop. Remember how when the for loop and the I, it keeps track of every element in the array. So it checks every time. So the item stands for like the I in the for loop. So keep that in mind. And now we're just gonna open this function and we're gonna return, let's just return item. Okay. So now if we console log our data, we should have all these kind of like created in here. So let's run that. So as you can see, it returned a new array. So this is a new array, and it kind of just showed us. So that's all we did. We just said return each one of them. So that's what it did. So it checked each one of them and it returned. So now let's do something with it. So what we need to do now is we're gonna check. We're gonna make everything. We could do something with this, but the general idea is this. But before we move on, remember how here we saw this. This is an arrow function right there. So we could change this function, the inner function, to an arrow function. So let's do that. Let's comment this out. Let me get some water. So we're going to comment that out, and then we're going to create an arrow function within the map. And that's usually how the data is used when you're trying to make a map function. So let's just say constant our data city data dot map. So instead of that function, we're just gonna use this this way. So the x is the item. So we're gonna say item, and then we're just gonna give it an arrow right here. Give it an arrow, and then remember how the arrow function, you don't have to do the return, all that stuff. So we're just gonna return an item. So now it should return the same thing. Hopefully, if we did the syntax. So this is where it always kind of trips up. Make sure that your arrow function is correct. If you want to put more items here, you put it like that. So if you want to put, so here's another thing to keep in mind is that this item, which is all the data, is each data. So what we could do is right here, we could say we would just want to get the city. So I don't know why this is in quotation, but no problem. So we're going to say city. And this is, if you see quotation here in the key, that means this is a, who can tell me what this is? Anyone remembers? If you have a quotation around the key instead of the value, I mean, both the value and the key, what kind of data is this? Is this object or something else? Who remembers?
JSON.
JSON. Okay, so this is a JSON data. So JSON, you know JSON, the difference between JSON, which is it's written like that, JSON, JavaScript object notation. That's what it stands for. And we will learn this much in detail and later. JavaScript object notation. Notation. So the how you know is by the quotes around the keys. So that's how you know. But I don't think it will make a big difference. Okay. So city. So now we're just gonna get the city here. So now if we run it, we should just get the names of the cities, as you can see here, and a new array. So that's how powerful the map is. It just goes, instead of using for loop, checking the I, and then saying that city, this one just checks the city. And this is the same as if we comment out this and we uncomment this. This is same as saying dot city here. It's just like that. So this function is right here within this function, and all we did was we said item.city, and the item stands for each item in the array. Another thing to so keep this in mind, but we'll go back to it and we'll keep learning how to use an array. But I just want to make sure you understand how the map works instead of how the array works. I mean, arrow function works. So now there's another thing called index here. So index is another thing that the map takes. So if we go down here, you'll see that it takes a couple of things. It takes first thing it takes is a current value, which is the item. We just did the item. So the current value element being in process in the array. So each value or element that's being processed. So each one of them. And then there's index, which is optional. The index returns the index of the current item. So the index of the current item that we're in. So right now, Seattle is an item. It has an index, Who remembers what arrays start? What index?
0.
0. Yes. So Seattle is 0, 1, 2, 3. So now if we just go here and also return that, so return, you could only have one thing at a time, but we could just do this. We could just do that and say item dot index. Hopefully this works. If we say that and we save it, run. So it's not different. So we cannot combine those two. So if we just return the index instead of the item of the city, we could just say here index. It should show us all the index of all the items. So how many things we have here? Started from 0. I don't know why it's saying undefined. Index. Did I spell it correctly? Oh, okay. We don't say item. We just say index here. Okay, I think that's where I was having an issue. So it will just return 0, 1, 0. So this is an item. This is another item. So it's like 4 items. So we could also return the normal. So let's say item dot city, comma index. Return like that. It should work. Yeah, we were saying item dot index. That wouldn't work. Oh, it's returning the last thing. Okay, so the main thing is just to understand, like, this is the index and this is the, you could actually say here, never mind, you could say here index, because remember the index is just like the I, so we could put it anywhere with the item. So when we print the item, the city, it should also print the index next to it properly. All right. Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay. So you understand, this is the index of each item. This is the item, each item like this. Okay. So that's how you filter it through. So that's a map for you. Okay. Any question about map and how to do? So let's do one more thing. Let's change something, change things up. How do we want to change the city name? So let's clear this. Each city name, we want to change it to a let's see. We want to change it to uppercase. How do we do it? So there is a method called dot to upper, yeah, to uppercase. To uppercase. I think that's how it is. I think that's the method. So we return it run. Should make it all capital. So just like that. So you could do a lot of things with it. So any questions about map so far and how to convert it to a arrow function? If you want to change, if you want to add the index into arrow function, you do this. So you put right here, and then you just say index. And now if we run the index here, it should give us all the indexes. And if we comment this out, it should come out to all the indexes. So it's exactly the same. So keep that in mind. A lot of times it's just an arrow function here. So that's how you see it in the wild. All right. So I hope everyone understood that, how map works. Okay. I'm gonna move on to the next method, which is in the order. I'm just going this order. Should we go to reduce? Okay, I think we could go to reduce. Okay. So let's go to reduce. Let's go to reduce and actually let us actually check it here. So it should be somewhere here. Reduce. It's right there. So what is reduce? So reduce method executes a reducer function. It's a function that it runs in the background that you provide on each element of the array, resulting in a single output. So reducer, what it does is it takes all the things you gave and it gives you one item, one input, one output. I mean, one single output, and that output is the everything it reduced, everything it kind of like accumulated. So it put together. So this is how you write. You give it an array of numbers. So usually reducer works with just the numbers. There are times you could use a string, but I mean, you have to use it in a certain way, but it's designed for numbers. So you need two things. So this is an arrow function. You might not understand it well, but it takes two things. It takes a accumulator and it takes a current value. Okay. So let's actually write it down so that it's easier for you to see instead of this arrow function that you might be confused about. So reduce, what it does is it returns a value, not an array. Okay. It does not manipulate or mutate. I'll just write manipulate because I have notes. Manipulate the original, which is important. It's used for sums and products usually. So products in like shopping, if you want to create a shopping application, you usually use reduce to kind of like put all the if you have a cart and then you want to put all the prices together, you use reduce. Also could be used for anything. So it doesn't have to be just for products and things like that. All right. So let's so we have numbers in our data right here. Let's actually copy the data so we could actually see it down there. Right here, let's put it right here. So this data, what we're gonna do is we're gonna reduce some of the numbers. So these numbers or these numbers. So first thing we need to do is, of course, have a variable here. So we're gonna say something like total land area. So we wanna calculate all the total land area of these cities. Then we're gonna call the data. So we're gonna say city.data, and then we're gonna say dot reduce. Okay, just like the dot map. And then now we're gonna open a function here. So this is the callback function that we're talking about. So the callback function will take two things, but one thing is only mandatory, like right here. They have two things, but if you go down and it explains, the accumulator is yeah. So two things are important. Two things are you have to give it. You have to give it accumulator and current value, but the index and other things are kind of like optional. And also the value of the accumulator is optional, and we'll see what that actually means. So accumulator, okay, you could call it whatever you want. This is kind of like the way developers call it, so you know what this is. You know, if you type something like accu, something like that, nobody's gonna understand what is it doing. Accumulator. So just call accumulator all the time so that it's easier. And also the item, which is like the land area that we're trying to reduce. So item. So that's the two things to pass. So accumulator and the current value. I mean current value, not this current value. Okay, so let's put current value here. Actually, makes sense. Current value is, I'll show you what that actually is in a second. So let's open the function. So the current value is a number that you will give the reduce. I mean the reduce function, or the reduce the main function to start with. So right here, right after where the function ends, you give it a 0 here, and this 0 matches with accumulator. Okay, I mean matches with the current value. Well, technically, okay. So let me not confuse you. Actually, the accumulator is the 0. Okay, I mean they kind of reverse, so they go back and forth. So the current value sometimes is this 0 kind of accumulates, so it becomes more, then it becomes the current value. And then when the original, when it starts, is the accumulator. So they kind of go back and forth, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, so accumulator is right now is the 0. Why? So who can tell me why are we putting 0 here? Why are we starting with 0 when we add in all the numbers? Who remember? I mean, not remember. Who saw that this and read about it?
Because of the index.
Okay, so the index. So here in the reduce, basically what it does is it starts with a number. So it has to start with something. So if it starts with this, now we're gonna have an issue because it's gonna start with like 8390, and the 8390 is it's not gonna be part of the data. So we're gonna say, okay, start from 0. That's what we're trying to say. Okay, so let's actually console log everything so you know what is happening. Let's console log a message here. Let's say let's console log the accumulator and the current value so we can see what are they doing each step. Okay, so I'll use a backticks and I'll say I am the accumulator. Okay, and then we're gonna put the accumulator here. Okay, so I want you to see what the accumulator does, what the current value does. Okay, so accumulator. Okay, so now let's do another console log and let us give it a backtick and say I am the current value. Okay, and give the current value here. Current value. All right. So now let's actually see how this. Let's return this function, the inner function. Return. We're gonna return two things. We're gonna return the accumulator plus the item, or I mean the current value that LAN area. So we're gonna say accumulator plus current value dot land. Remember, we're trying to add the land area together. Land area. Okay. So now we're gonna see what this is. So let's console log this whole thing. Let's console log total land area. Okay. So we're gonna have that. So let's run it. So it's kind of doing its thing. Okay. Why did it say that? Maybe I spelled it wrong. Okay, I think that's dead. Okay. Let's make sure. Current value.
Current value.
What is it?
Console log current value.
Oh yeah. I did it wrong, I think.
Actually,
You have a space in current and value.
Give me a second. One second. I'm still doing lecture. All right, 1 second. So let me explain a little bit what is happening. Give me a second. I'm trying to. Okay. So basically, so you said the current value right here. I misspelled it or something. Sorry about that. So okay, let's clear it and run it again. Okay.
actual or total land area.
Total land area. This one. So this one is calling it. It's calling, but it's not. It's. I think I misspelled this one. Yeah, accumulator.
No, those are right. The console log in the middle of lullabies, they're right, but that's the one that kind of win total land area. I think that's the one.
Yeah, back.
Oh yeah, you're right. 100%. Okay, so it should run. Okay, actually it's not on. It's an object. Let me see my notes. Okay. Oh yeah, I got it. So we have to say here dot. We have to say dot land area. Okay. So clear it. Run. So now it's gonna do one thing after another. So now what it did was it started with the accumulator of a 0 right here. And then what it did was it went to the current value and it grabbed the first one, which is this one. And then after that, it went back to the accumulator, and it took 0 and added 83.9, and now the accumulator is 83.9. Now it went back and it took this data 302 and put it in the current value, and now the accumulator said, okay, I want to take that and add it to the older number, which is 83,302. Now the accumulator is 386. So it's kind of accumulating basically. And then the current value now is this, which is right here. And it the accumulator said, okay, I'm going to take the older number and then add it together. So it added here. So the accumulator added these two. So the old number and this one, and that's what it got. And then the current value is the last one, which is 300. It grabbed the last number, 315, and then the accumulator added everything and said, okay, there's no more current value. So now I'm gonna add it like that. So yeah, so that's how this number came. So this is we reduced everything to the total. Okay. Any questions about how the accumulator works and how the current value works?
So you're saying that it starts with 0 and then
start with 0, which we defined it right here. We defined it already.
And then
yep. So it starts the accumulator. First, it starts with the accumulator, and then the accumulator, we set it to 0. Then the current value grabs something from the top, which is 83.9, and then it basically kind of like sends it to the current value. Accumulator, and the accumulator adds 0 to 83, and then after that, it says 83. So now, and then the current value runs, which is right here, and then after that, the accumulator adds the old number to the new number, and then it gives you a new number. And then now just the circle keeps going back.
Okay.
Let me undo this. Okay. Any questions about that?
What if you wanted the value to be in order, like from least, like from the most to least, something like that? If you wanted like the value let's say, so it starts from 0. I do see it. Okay, so it starts from 0 and then 83.9, and then it goes down. And then right here you have 48.3. But is there a way, like, is it possible to have the number like from least, like from least to greatest, or greatest to least, or something like that?
Okay, so to kind of like sort the number so that you have like from least to greatest. Okay, yeah, I mean there is a way. You could actually, I think, say something like, if we console log here again, if we say console log, and then you have to kind of like save this in somewhere, but you could say something like current value dot, you could say something like sort. I think you could use a method, and then after that, I mean, not sort, but you have to say total land area, and then dot sort, something like that. So it will basically kind of sort the numbers for you, and then return. So you have to save that in a variable, and then run that. So I'm not sure if this is gonna run, but let's see. Yeah, it's not gonna current value dot land area dot sort. Yeah. So it will not run because this is a we're already in a function. So you kind of have to put it here and save it, create a variable here, and then push the information, the current value information to that. So that's kind of like the only way to run it.
Got it.
Yeah. Any other question? So yeah, so that's how so now this was just an example I was showing you how it works, but right now it will return basically a let me just delete that. it will return the number. So that's what it do basically. So if we run, it will just return the total. That's what it does. So it just basically returns the total. So that's generally reduced. Let's change this to actually a arrow function. Let's change this to arrow function. If anyone can help me. So total land area. So we say city data dot reduce. So what do we do here? Can someone walk me through the what do we remove and what do we add? So arrow, we change it into arrow function. So the first step of changing something to arrow function is removing the function thing. So now let's just kind of like just say accumulator. Let's copy these two so I don't miss a spell. And we put these two right here. Okay. The next step of arrow function is adding the actual arrow right here. And the third step is you could either remove the whole curly bracket or you could just keep it. So let's keep it so that it kind of looks nicer. So now we're just going to do this, copy this part, put it right here, and then put a 0 here. So comma 0. So that should be exactly the same as the top one. We just remove the what do you call the function part and then added a arrow function here. So this should return the same number. Okay. We could simplify it just like it's written here. So we could simplify it like this by removing this whole thing. So we're gonna remove the return, and then we're gonna move the curly bracket, and then after that we have to kind of make it longer here. Remove this whole thing, and say comma 0, just like that one line. I know it looks real crazy, but that's like one line of. Hopefully that works. So let's clear it and run. So that runs too. So as you can see. So that's how you change it to arrow function. So that might be something that will come into the questions in the assignment. How do you take a normal function that is like a map or reduce, and how do you change it to an arrow function? Okay, so let me write a note here. Convert to arrow function. Let us change. Let me give this one a note too. Convert to arrow function. Okay, so that's generally how we do it. Any questions about reduce so far? Any questions about reduce? So let's go. Let's take. Okay, before we go filter, let's take a break. Because filter, I think, is the last thing, and then after that, we're gonna do questions and things like that. A little bit, maybe more practice, and then after that, inshallah, we'll conclude it. So yeah, let's take a break. 10-minute break, and then get to filter, and then kind of go from there, inshallah. So 10-minute break. 10-minute timer. All right.
مو ها ها هي وضع أنا يقول على ذكر وضع صح صح أعطيك الستيت إنه قول لي إنه وضعنا أم الشيء كلام يقول لك هاي إنه قش أم
Mereka waxaa waa intaas waa jiraan laakiin hal maalin intaa xaafadii soo marisa maalin iyadoo maalin caadi
sheekh maxamed waa lagu maqlaa insha allah ismiyid kare
أيوه أستاذ
All right. Okay, let's get back to it, inshallah. Okay. Let's get back to it. All right, let's finish it up. So we were doing, we're gonna do filter. So what does filter do? Let's read about it. If you want only, so this data is exact same data we're using. So this one is saying, what if you only want to see states whose population is greater than 650,000? With the prior JavaScript knowledge, it might make sense to create something like this. So basically, this is what it's saying is, remember how we talked about the for loop, and I showed you guys the population. Let's say if Somalis, if the populations are more than 20,000, show us. We did something like this. We used this for loop, and we basically doing for loop, and we're saying if the population is more than this number, push the data to this array. That's what we're doing. So now, how do we do this in a filter, right? So filter, remember what it does? It filters the data. So let's see what filter does right here. Filter method creates a new array with all the elements that passed the test of implement by the provided function. So you have to give it a function that kind of like gives it a something to, like, you have to give it a condition to check, basically. So right now here we have a array, and we're creating a new filter. We're saying a new filter, words, which is this one, that filter. So here we're saying this is arrow function. It's saying basically words the length of greater than 6. Any word that has a length of greater than 6 characters, uh, bring it to us, like put it in here, basically. So it creates a new array. So now if you run this, it brings that. So now you understand what the arrow function is. We did several times. So from now on, we're not going to do the function, the normal function. So let's move on. So let's do filter. Let's write down what filter does, all the things about filter. Let's go to here. So filter. So filter, what it does is it returns a new array. So this, all of them is like that. So that's why they're really important. Does not manipulate. So does not, and this might come in question or something like that, probably in the Sprint project. So keep that in mind. The original. It filters out results into the new array, and it basically, and then we return, we need an array. So we need an array. So filter doesn't work in like if you give it just a variable or something like that. It needs an array. Okay. So let's write down a basic filter function. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say constant, and we're gonna grab the data that we're working with and put it right here. Doesn't really matter where we put it. Okay. So now what we're doing is we're creating a new function, and we're gonna say something like let's filter a let's filter the population if they're more than, like, let's say 50,000. So we're gonna say we're gonna give it a big pot. We're gonna say something like large pot. Okay. Okay. We're gonna say that, and then we're gonna equal to the data itself name. So let's say city data dot filter. So now right here, we can use the normal function or the arrow function. So let's go with the arrow function right here. So what are we trying to get is item. So we're going to say item. And then we're going to say, we're going to give it an arrow function here. Then we want to return a if the item dot population is greater than 50,000. So 50,000. I think that's 50,000. Okay. Yep. So 50,000. Okay. So that's pretty much it. So now we're gonna console log large pub. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So we're expecting to have an array, couple of arrays. So right here, these are the two or the three places that have more than 50,000 people. Okay. So and I think these cities have way more than 50,000 maybe. But the main thing is like right here. So this is the arrow function, and who can help me return this to an like a usual function that we usually use? We're going in reverse, and we're practicing this because you need it. You need that practice. How do we return? How do you change this to a usual function? Can someone walk me through it?
Function,
Mm-hmm.
and then parenthesis,
Parenthesis.
and then item,
Item. Okay.
and then you open the curly braces,
Uh-huh.
then you return item the population is greater than 50,000.
Greater than 50,000. Okay. All right. Greater than 50,000. Good. So that's pretty much it. So this one is exactly the same as that. So let us delete and run. Should return the three cities. Okay. So that's what you should know, kind of like how to return a function to arrow function, how to change arrow function to the usual function. So that will definitely help you in the long run. So okay. So that's pretty much a filter, and you could do so many things with it. We could change the we could check any data here. We could say if the land area is greater than this number, we could add more conditions here if we want. So that's mostly what it does. So right here, that's what we're basically doing. So filter is pretty easy, and it doesn't have any more complications. So you usually give it a condition, and it kind of like gives you that condition. Make sure the condition has a false somewhere, so that, for example, if you say anything like something that is we said over 50,000, if we give it, let's see, yeah, I think it takes care of the infinite loop, so you don't have to worry about it. I think the same result on the cleaner code. Okay, and it says here, yeah, so we don't have any issues with a forever looping thing. So instead of having that forever loop, you just use filter, and it gives you clean. This is a clean code. It's cleaner than this, basically. So this is what you need to do to pretty much return the same result. So if we kind of like cancel, kind of like comment that out and paste this here. So we're going over this data. So let's just replace that to this, and length, population over 50,000, let's say, and then saving it in here instead of large. Let's change the large states to large pop, and we should have exactly the same result. Oh, actually change here this to that, and this, and that should be it. Okay. So large is not defined. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So change this to this. Run it. Should work the same. We have three states here. So instead of going through all this a for loop and if statement, this is all you have to do. It's just one line here. If you want to do the arrow function, sorry, it's one line here. So it's much cleaner. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? All right.
I have a question, Ustad.
Yeah, go ahead.
Most of the things you're working now, you're using constant. So is that how it's used often or
What
don't
are we
matter?
using? What are we using? You said.
Constant instead of
Oh
let
yes,
or
yes, yeah. So that's kind of like a practice. So you have to make sure that all the time you use constant, unless you don't have to. So
okay.
make sure it's just a practice. So that's what I usually do. You know, unless something you're doing it specifically, I always use constant, and it helps you keep track of something. So if we use here var, then later we can redefine this to something else. So we could say something like, instead of large, so instead of like that, we could say var large pop is equal to city data dot map blah blah blah. Now you're kind of screwed because you're overriding your filter basically. So the data that you have in here, it will be overwritten. And remember, we said something about mutation and changing the data. So now var, it will change that variable, and you will not have a array that you thought you had. So that's why we keep using constant, is because it's the safest way to keep your data clean, and you don't have any issues with it, right? And this will give you an error because we're declaring 2 times, so just use one. But it's just a practice. You could use a let if you want here, so it's not a big deal. So if we use a let here and we console log the same thing, it will do the same thing. We could also use var, so it's going to be the same. Var clean run, it will be the same. But the issue is, like, you don't want your data to kind of be overwritten in the future.
Okay.
Any questions so far? All right,
Did you
let's see.
go over? Did you go over for each? Did I miss that?
No, we didn't go over for each. We kind of skipped that one, but
Got
we
it.
could do that too. No problem. So
Just one example, because I see it's on the assignment.
okay, no problem. Let's go over for each. So they're very similar, all of them, but let's go over for each. Actually, I have the notes for it too. For each is another method, just like this, but it's very similar to map. Okay, so let's see. So for each, so if we go here, the usual thing. So always make sure we check what are we talking about here. So for each, let's see, right here. So for each method executes provided function once for each array element. Okay, so you give it an array, and then it takes the element, which is each iteration, just like the map, each iteration, and just like the I in the for loop, and then it just console logs each one of them. So this is what it does, the output. So let's see. I don't see any. Okay, so here, calls provided callback function once for each element in the array, ascend in order. So it does ascend in order. It does not invoke for index properties that have been deleted or are unutilized, uninitialized. Okay, callback. Okay, so these are all the things that it's kind of has, but it's very similar to map. That's why I didn't go over it. But let's see. So this one it has few things that are maybe a little bit different. Must iterate through every item in an array without stopping. So you cannot have a asynchronous, which we will get to, operation in a for each. For For each doesn't return a new array. So that's one of the flaws of for each. It does not return a new array, so it mutates the original array. Return is optional, so you don't have to return it, so you don't have to write that. And then also I wrote down a note that says if you are working with a massive data sets, a for loop may be better. So, and then I wrote down if this starts to slow down the browser. So it has a lot of flaws. That's why a lot of people don't use it. That's when you might consider a for loop instead. So that was kind of like a note I wrote down a long time ago. So let's see how it actually works. So it's pretty much the same as the other ones. So let's create our constant here. So let's see. So let's say something like our data. Let's put it here. Data. What was it? City data. Okay. City data dot for each. So for each, you have to write it like that, for, and then capital E for each. And then after that, you open it. No, not like that. You open it, and then we do our callback function here. So we say function, we give it an item, okay? And then open the function right here and say return. We could just return the item, and it will just kind of like loop through the whole thing. So if we do that, and why did I say out data? And then we run it. So let's actually clear it first and run it. Okay, it returns. Okay, so give me a second. Someone is calling me that it's an important call. Give me 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. It's it's a hawalat. I was calling to the hawalat. So so it's returning undefined. Okay. Let's see, why is it returning undefined? So let's go back to the way it. So we have to console log the return, right? So always you have to look at the syntax of how something is written. So you have to console log here, and then we don't even have to do this in reality, and we don't have to save it in a variable because we're doing just console log. We could run it. So it should return the data, all of it, one by one. So it iterated each one of the data. And right here, you could, I think, call city, and it should return the cities. Okay, let me see yeah. So it should return city. So the thing about it is that it's not returning. It doesn't return a array. So as you can see here, it's not array. And let's actually save it in a variable. Let's actually here do it like that. City, and let's get the type of what that is. Remember we did the type thing when we were starting JavaScript. So type of. I think that's how it's written. Let's say out data. Let's go with the way it's written. Out data. It's gonna give us, I think, undefined. I'm not sure. Let's see. So it's undefined. Okay, that's fine. So it doesn't, you can't even save it in a variable. Let's go back to the notes here. Let's go back to here. So you just call the array and then you console log it inside. So there's no way to even save it in its own array, its own variable. So that's pretty much it. So it's very limited. It doesn't have a lot of uses. The first
You're looping through, right?
yeah, we're looping through it. So each city, each item, we're looping through them. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, so element or item is is
yeah, it's print,
represent all items.
yeah,
Okay,
it's printing each item, and also you could use index here too. So index, and we could actually we don't even have to use the return here, and we could like print out the index too. Console log, let's say index, it'll return the index for each one of them. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So it takes the index 2. So it is limited, but it has its own uses. So there is very specific places that you will use for each. You will not use it for everything. If you want to use for everything, use map. So if you want to just loop through anything and you want to return a new array, map is your best friend. Map. So yeah, that was the main thing I didn't cover because it's very limited. But if it's in the problems, yeah, I should have covered it. So thank you for letting me know. Any questions so far? I'm looking through my notes if I missed anything. Any questions? Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Let's look at the assignment for today. So the assignment, you have two problems, two files. So make sure you fork it and then you clone it. So the usual stuff. So let's go to the array methods. So this one gives you a larger data set. And then just like the problem we had last time, you use for each. It gives you a what are you going to use this for? So use for each to do this problem. Use for dot map to do this. Use dot filter to use this. And then there's more here, so you can be creative too. So and this last one is be creative. Now we have used all this. I want you to think of potential problems you could solve given the data and 5K fun runtime theme. I don't even remember what I was writing. Okay, so just read through the problem, and yeah, this is the 5K run. So read through the problems and see how you could solve that. Callbacks, we did talk about callbacks, so I give you a couple of problems. Callbacks, so high order functions, and callback. You have all these problems, and read through the problems. So I'll ask you to read everything. So that would be the best way to kind of know what you need to do is by reading each word, understanding it before you move on, and read through here. Read through what this is, and here's what I'm asking. Read through this too, the array method. And if you wanna go, and if you finished all that, you can do the stretch, but first you have to finish those. Yeah, so that's it. And if you want to run it, you can use the index. Any questions so far?
Ustad,
Ha.
I have a question. How the callback is different from the arrays? How is it different from the arrays methods you're talking about right now?
So callback is what we used in the array methods. So for example, if we go to the map right here, and we uncomment one of them, this is a callback. Not sorry, this is not callback. Let me see. Yeah, it's a callback. I was thinking closure and something like that. It's just all these words in my head. This is a callback function, basically. and this is an higher order function. So map is a higher order function, and this map thing is already created for you. It's part of the JavaScript array method. So it's like that length. So it's already created, but it takes the argument. It takes the parameters. I mean the argument. I mean the argument it takes is a callback function. So the parameter is already defined in the JavaScript system, but the argument it takes is a function that does something and then returns something. So yeah, if we break this down, it's just like how we had it here. So let me just, as a pseudo code, if you ever heard pseudo code is I don't know how to spell it, pseudo code. But pseudo code is a like example of how the code looks like by just writing in English. So if we write this in like normal English, we're gonna say something like we're writing this part. So let's write this part. We're saying something like function map, and then we're saying here callback. So this is how, like in the JavaScript systems, this is how it kind of looks like. And then we're saying is return a callback function. So that's kind of like how this map looks like. This is a way simplified way of how map looks like in the system, but it does way more than this. And then this function inside is a function we're gonna create outside. So actually we have to pass, yeah. So it's this function is the callback. So it's this thing, and we could create it outside. So it's just like this, having like this. It's anonymous function, so all callbacks are anonymous. So you have to give it a variable. So you have to say something like constant. We have to say something like a past function is equal to that. So this is the function we're gonna pass to the callback, and then you return in the map. So you're basically saying a map like that, and then passing this function right here. Okay. So that's basically what you're doing with this whole thing. But you don't have this one, and it's already created for you. So all you're doing is just you're passing. You're doing the passing only like that.
Okay.
So hope that makes sense. It's very oversimplified, but it could be that. But just keep in mind, anything you pass in these higher order functions is a callback. This is a callback, either as an arrow function or as a normal function. Yeah. Let's see if we have anything special here that we're gonna cover. I think we kind of covered some of this, some of the math stuff related. But yeah, just look over it. Let me know if you have any issues with it, or you can't figure it out. Then we can go over it. Any questions before we close out? All right.
Yeah. Can you go to the assignment?
The assignment, yeah, right here. Which one?
The array method.
Methods, okay.
Method. So
this
the last challenge, I just don't understand the question. I just read it.
So this one says now we already used this. So I want you to think of potential problems you could solve given the data set of 5K round fun theme. So it's the 5K round fun theme is this thing, this whole data. Try to create and solve 3 unique problems using one or many other array methods listed above. So I'm basically saying, okay, we solved all this, but figure out a creative way to solve something. Maybe say something like filter the first name equal to Yule or whatever, just find another way to like find something like, I think we did already the putting together all these donations and saying reduce. I think we did that problem. So maybe find something like any shirt size bigger than any shirt size equal to XL, and then save it in a new new array. So just creative ways of like figuring out how do we filter through this, or how do we map over a certain part of it and do something with it. That's what I mean by being creative, basically.
So
So
you have to do like 1, 2, 3, one top.
yeah, 3 problems. So and these problems are also just giving you basically what you need to do. So
Okay.
instead of me telling you what you need to do, find your own problem. Just look through the data and say, okay, what can I solve? Can I find all the emails that end at Gmail or something like that, or certain email? Can I filter through like names that start with like T or something like that? That's what I mean by like being creative about the data, just filtering through it that way. So yeah, so do those after you finish this, but this is also, it helps you understand how I came up with these basically. So you're coming up with your own problem, your own challenge, and then solving it. Any questions? All right, we will close it out, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow at 6. Let's see what the date is tomorrow. Okay, so we have Wednesday. So tomorrow at 6, you get started with this assignment. Make sure you submit your old assignments. I'm gonna be grading them tonight or tomorrow morning. So make sure you submit everything you have. If you're stuck, make sure that you contact me, and I can help you with what you're stuck. But try your best to solve all the problems and submit everything you have. So I'll grade tomorrow, and try your best, inshallah. Try your best. Don't let all these assignments kind of like pile up. That would be a bigger problem than you think. So try your best, inshallah, to just get it out of the way and move to the
Yeah.
next one.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow, and have a good night. Assalamu alaikum.